So you want to take the LSAT. Well, here are my tips for how to get a 170 or above on that test. First, you obviously want to buy the practice tests, the tests that they've administered in previous years. Once you've got those tests in your hands, what you want to do is create a schedule for yourself. What I recommend you do is that you take one practice test per week. I'd advise you against taking 2 tests per week because I think that it would lead to burnout. I think that it's not very productive early on in your studying. And early on, what's best is that you just dedicate your whole week to understanding the one test that you took, understand the questions that you got right, understand the questions that you got wrong, understand why other wrong answers were wrong, so that you at least know what you're getting into. Once you've created your schedule, and by the way, you want to treat this like a part-time job, a heavy part-time job, but not quite a full-time job. Certainly spending 40 hours a week on this test is a bit much and a bit overwhelming. So a heavy part-time job that you maybe spend 25 hours a week or so on is good enough. Then you want to move on to focus on the specific sections and how you're progressing with them. What I recommend is that you start off trying to make your analytical reasoning as strong as possible. So this is the logic games. These are ones where they basically have this set, usually of letters. So A, B, C, and D all walk into a bar at certain times. If A walked in before D and B walked in after A, then what time could A have walked in? They're basically grilling you on your ability to kind of put things together. And often there's process of elimination involved in these questions, unlike with logical reasoning and reading comprehension. What you want to do is make sure that your analytical reasoning game is airtight. Try and get those questions right as much as possible. Get it so that you can get a perfect score every time you do analytical reasoning. Logic games can be easily mastered if you just put the time into understanding how they work and how you can diagram them. Next, you're going to focus on logical reasoning. You'll probably notice that the first, say, 12, 13, 10 questions of logical reasoning tend to be very easy. They're kind of just warming you up for what's to come. Then once you get around question 13 all the way to question 22 or so, you're going to start dealing with some really tough questions. Questions that usually have really lengthy passages, questions that can be really tricky and have some really tempting wrong answers. What you want to do is make sure that you get those questions under control. You don't need to get them all perfect like with analytical reasoning where you're diagramming them out, but you want to make sure that you're getting them right more often than not, significantly more often than not. The questions at the end, I'm talking about questions 23 to 26 usually, they tend to be a little bit easier than those questions, but it's usually the middle of the test that is the most difficult. And the middle of the logical reasoning is the part that you want to focus on the most. Focus on getting those questions down after you've got the analytical reasoning down. So then when you're at the point where you're always getting your analytical reasoning correct and you're getting most of your logical reasoning correct, you want to move on to try and perfect your reading comprehension game. And by perfect it, I don't mean literally get all of them right because that's very hard to do. Reading comprehension is often considered the most difficult section. But what you want to do is at least get to the point where maybe you get 4 or 5 out of the 27 questions wrong. It's difficult. There's often a very long passage, usually one that involves science, and that you have several questions on each passage, usually like 6 or 7 questions. Now obviously you can get a few wrong and still get a score that's in the 170s, but once you start getting like 7, 8, 9, 10 wrong, that can be dangerous even if you're doing really well with the analytical reasoning and the logical reasoning. So what I found helps for reading comprehension is just jot down some notes as you're reading the passage. Not really extensive complete sentences, but use shorthand. Put that kind of in order of the passage because like I said, the passage is often very long so that you kind of remember it. It sticks in your brain when you're going back to the questions. So if you get a certain word in the questions that was referenced inside the passage, you know where to look. And if you're taking it online, with a proctor, you can obviously use Control F, which is really helpful. So there's that. But yeah, reading comprehension is definitely the most difficult section. But if you perfect your logical reasoning and your analytical reasoning, then you don't need to perfect your reading comprehension in order to get a score in the 170s or above. Just try to do as well as possible. It can be overwhelming. Now lastly, of course, you want to have a good headspace when you come in to take the test. That means that in the first few days, while you could obviously be a little bit stressed about this test, once you get up to it, those 3 days or so leading up to the test, just try to relax. Take a deep breath. And as I said, I recommend taking 1 test per week early on, but you can definitely amp it up to 2 tests per week once you get close to the test date. This will help ensure that you're prepared. You'll obviously, as you get closer to it, need to spend less time reviewing the actual tests and the questions, because you'll be able to more intuitively understand why you got a certain question wrong, or why you got a question right, or why a certain wrong answer was really tempting but still ultimately wrong. So yeah, these are my tips for how to get a 170 or above on the LSAT. I really hope that this was helpful to you. If you found this helpful and you'd like me to go into more detail, I'm very happy to do that. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe below. I really appreciate it. Thank you.